everybody. Welcome back to Two Bi Guys. We've got a really exciting episode today. My guest today is an award-winning sex and gender specialist, a sex educator, and now an author. She has worked at the NHS, the LGBT Consortium, the YMCA, and many more organizations to improve health and well-being outcomes for young people and the LGBT community. And she has written a forthcoming book called Step by Step. We love the bi puns. The ultimate guide for bisexual, pansexual, and queer young people.
I
And
have
there
it
it is,
right
if you're
here.
watching
Here it
on
is
video.
in all of its
Step
glory.
by step. Indeed, you have an advanced copy. How'd you get one of
I
those? You're the
do.
author. Okay.
You got to know the author.
Indeed. And it is published by Jessica Kingsley Publishers. It will be out on September 18th, 2025, which is right around now, whenever
It's
this
so
comes out. We'll
soon.
say
It's so soon. It's actually scary.
so soon. It might even be in the past by the time you're listening to this, but probably it's in the future. And so welcome to Two Bi Guys, Laura Clarke. Hello.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm so glad to talk to you about this book because, I did like book season last year or 2 years ago. All these new bi books. There's so many
I
more. Like
know.
half
It's
of them are
amazing.
published by Jessica Kingsley. They're doing a lot
Yeah,
of great
they're
work.
really sort of leading the charge when it comes to buy books.
Yeah, they really are. Many guests have published with them. Maybe I should. But yours is the first one that I have seen that's really geared toward young people.
Yeah.
So why don't
Yeah.
we start there? Like, tell us, why did you want to write this book?
So I think I have known in some way that I was bi since I was about 11 or 12 years old. So I was really young. I maybe didn't necessarily have the language for that. I think the word bisexual came a little later, but I remember just feeling that something was kind of different, feeling that I felt a little bit different to my friends. And I was very much the boy crazy child that everyone was. I always had lots of boyfriends, even when I was when I was like 3 or 4, I was the person walking around the playground holding hands with a boy. So everyone really knew me as boy crazy, but I felt like that was accurate, but there was also another side to it as well.
Mm,
As I got older, I started doing more reading, not necessarily when I was a teenager, but maybe in my young adult years, I started doing more reading into bisexuality and kind of discovering not only my identity, but the sort of systems that are in place surrounding bisexuality, how we fit in to general society, but also to queer communities, and some of the things that I had felt were a bit amiss or a bit different. So I started doing a lot of reading, and I just noticed that a lot of the books I were reading were fantastic, but they were very academic, or they were maybe geared at people that were a little bit older. And I just kind of thought how much I would have benefited from a book that had all of this information in, but in a more accessible way when I was a bit younger, like 12 or 13. And then I started doing some research, and I just realized there isn't really anything out there. Like everything is kind of geared towards, at the very least, older teenagers. So I wanted to write something. I mean, my book is targeted at 13 to 18-year-olds, and I really wanted to write something that you could read when you're just like a little baby bisexual and you're figuring out your identity. And it doesn't feel too scary, but at the same time, it's not going to patronize you. It's going to tell you, the stuff you need to know, but it's going to do so in a fun way and in an accessible way. And yeah, that's how Step by Step was kind of born.
I love that. This is like the book that I needed, although I don't even know if as a teenager I would have consciously connected to it or sought it
Yeah.
out. But reading it, I was like, oh, if I had read this as a teenager, the way it's written is so open and inclusive. I might have thought, oh yeah, maybe this is me, but
Oh,
obviously it
thank
couldn't
you.
have been written 25 years ago
I know.
because
Well,
our
yeah, it's kind of a cliche to say, like, I've written the book that I wanted when I was a teenager, but
yeah
it's true. And I think that even though that's a cliche, I think it's a
yeah
cliche for a reason because, I think that that means that you've written a book that is authentic and is one of the main pieces of feedback I've had about this book is that it's compassionate and that it's warm
mhm,
hearted. And that's all I ever wanted it to be. I wanted it to feel like something you can go to that feels really safe and it feels really inclusive and it's not like
yeah
trying to dictate anything. it's not saying it's got it all figured out. It's just kind of there as a guide. And I really hope that I've achieved that with the book.
Yeah, from what I've read, it very much is that, and it's very, like, clear. Like, I actually think yeah, it may be kind of, like, geared towards teenagers and young people, but, like, it's actually one of the most simple, clear explanations of a lot of this stuff
Yeah.
that I've ever
Yeah.
seen.
Well, this is what I've been saying as I've kind of been talking to people about it is, it's for teenagers, sure, but I think it can also act as a very basic 101 introduction to bi and pan identities, no matter what age you are. If you're starting to figure things out in your mid 20s, mid 30s, later on, I think it can be a good place to start. And I think in a way it could be quite healing to have something that is like, this is what little you needed, so it could be a
Yeah,
good place to start. And I think also for parents and carers of bi teens as well, to have this as their guide to kind of like what information is going to be relevant to my teenager. How can I help them and guide them through? Because I deliver LGBT training and I meet adults all the time who
yeah,
don't know the very basics about bisexuality, and I have to explain that it's not necessarily 50-50 attraction, it's not necessarily attraction to just two genders, it's more than that. And that's new information to them. So if we have people
yeah,
that, because of it's not really through any fault of their own, is the kind of the system that we live in doesn't educate about these topics. But if we don't have that education, then you have to start somewhere, and hopefully, yeah, I feel like somebody could pick this up and get something from it.
yeah, indeed. I wanna get back to the parent stuff a little
Yeah.
later, that because,
Yeah.
like, there's yeah, like, it's almost like kids these days know more than their parents about this stuff sometimes,
Yeah.
but where are they learning it? And probably many kids are just learning from social media, which may not have all
Yeah.
the things correctly defined the way you have and thought through. Let me
Absolutely.
go here first though. Like, when you're writing for a younger audience, like younger teens, as opposed to older teens or, 20 somethings adults. How did you think about writing that? Like, what kind of tone, or how did you gear it
Yeah.
towards that younger
I
demographic?
knew that I wanted it to be funny in places,
Hmm,
and to not be all doom and gloom, and to throw in some jokes. I used to do stand-up comedy when I was in university, and
cool.
I wanted to kind of just inject a little bit of lightness into it, especially when we're talking about some things in the book. We're talking about biphobia, we're talking about a lack of representation, we're talking about, racism, ableism, within bi spaces. So it gets heavy, and I didn't want to detract from that, but I knew that I wanted to kind of just it not to be this thing that you pick up and you just feel terrible about the world. There's lightness
Yeah,
in there as well. And I think also as I was writing it, because I'm a sex educator, I go into schools, I deliver sex and relationships education. So I have a really good sense of kind of like what is age appropriate already through my work. But even when I was writing it, I kind of had moments where I was catching myself where I was talking about, sex or something that's maybe a little bit more maturing content. And I was double checking within myself, is this something that a 13-year-old needs to know? And it was a lot of reflecting back to my own time as a 13-year-old and being like, I was getting this information through the internet, even before the
right,
internet is what it is now, when it was
right.
a Tumblr blog.
Yeah,
And I was a lot of my bisexual learnings came from Tumblr. I was getting that information then, and I was getting it through whispers on the schoolyard, and I was, that information was being passed on to me, but not necessarily in the most accurate way. So I don't think this is a case of the young people are too young to know about this. I think they are going to know about this one way or another, and I would rather it come from somebody who is an accredited sex educator, has put care and thought
right.
into this, understands safeguarding and all of those elements, um, rather than kind of like whispers through the grapevine and, you know adult content online that maybe isn't appropriate. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think it was a lot of checking in with younger me, but also checking in with the expertise now that I have as a sex and relationships
yeah.
educator.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. Is like, the information is all on the computer and on the phone,
Yeah,
like, it's
yeah,
everywhere, and
yeah.
so, like, you can't shield kids from what they're interested in exploring and what they
No,
want to
absolutely
find
not.
information about, and so, yeah, like, I think that I was a teenager at the beginning of mass adoption of the internet, and
Yeah.
I found stuff and I
Yeah,
was
you will.
navigating it all on my own. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll either find it or someone will show it to you. Like, I think
Right.
it's only a matter of time, and I think that's increasingly true now. I
Yeah.
was 13 in 2009. So people who know what the internet was like in those days and how much it's changed, young people are going to see things, and it's just about, are they actually, I think it's really important about kind of beating the false information and the dangerous information to the punch. And actually people say, oh, are you giving them this information before
Yeah.
they're ready? And it's like, by the time they're ready, they're going to have got that information from other places. So it's
Right.
about kind of pre-preparing, and say, I think I say in the book, in the sex chapter, I say, you may not be thinking about this stuff right now, and that's so normal. I'm not saying this has to be on your mind right now or ever.
Yeah.
um, so this isn't necessarily information for you now, but I'd like you just to log it and keep it in the back of your mind, so that if you do
Yeah.
reach a point in the next few years where this does start to feel appropriate, you already have that information. You're not going to get it late. You're getting it nice and early.
Right. Right. Well, and also, like, in a heteronormative society, kids are learning about
Yeah,
relationships and sex without being told anything. They're
exactly.
learning just by what they see, and
Yeah,
everything is, I mean, it's changing now a little bit, but things are so heteronormative that you learn a lot from that, and you form this baseline opinion of, like, heteronormativity.
yeah,
That's what's
exactly.
normal.
Yeah,
So you kind of like, we kind of have to be explicit about this, at least until it becomes more
yeah,
visible in
definitely.
a, in daily life. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, I was, as a kid, I was boy crazy. That was what I was called and labeled, and I always think, like, if I, because I know that I think I've always been bi, and it's very apparent to me that what people saw was the boy craziness, but they didn't see the girl craziness, because I never made a
Mm,
conscious choice to keep that hidden at a young age, but I just knew that I had to. Um,
mm,
or if it was being shown, people saw what they wanted to see, and they just were like, "Oh, she's going after all these boys," and they didn't necessarily see the other side of it, because we live in such a heteronormative world. So yeah, I
right.
kind of think that, like, now I think I'm everybody crazy. but I
Yes.
but I didn't
Right.
necessarily feel like I was able to show that when I was younger.
Right, right, and it's sometimes, like, for me, it's like the heteronormative attractions make sense and people know how to talk about them,
Yeah.
and you share that, and then the other ones, like, the same-sex attraction sometimes doesn't, it doesn't come out in the same way, or it
No,
isn't
yeah.
visible in the same way, and so you categorize it differently. Like, even looking
Differently,
back,
yeah.
there are things that I look at now as, "Oh, those were
Oh,
attractions
that
that
yeah.
back then I categorized as, like, some weird kind of friendship thing going on that I didn't understand." And
Yeah. But, like, it's funny because, within my family, I've had multiple, like, female celebrities that I've been obsessed with over the years, that I've, really wanted to, like, watch all of their interviews, and that's been well documented within my family, but at no point did anybody raise any kind of, like, "Oh, could that be an attraction thing?" It was just like, "Oh, no, she's just a big fan. She admires these women." And in some cases that was true. But again, I wrote in the book about how, when I came out to my parents, my dad said, "Are you sure you don't just really admire women?" And I sort of had to flip it back on him and say, "Well, how do you know that you don't just really admire women?" And then he got a little bit like, "Oh, okay." Yeah,
yeah,
that's clicked for me now.
yeah,
I understand what you're saying. Um, but yeah, people see what they want to see, I think.
yeah, that's so interesting. It's like, maybe you just really admire that. Well, it's like, that's something. What is it to really admire someone? That's like,
Yeah.
is that totally categorically different from being
No,
attracted
there's
towards
a lot
someone?
of that in there as well, but it's just like, yeah, maybe I do, but also, if you just really admire someone, do you wanna kiss him? Do you wanna, like, So I think it was kind of flipping that back on my dad, and he got a little red, and he was like, "Okay, yeah, no, I get what you mean."
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Something you said just makes me think, like, yeah, I wish I had this book when I was a kid. Like, I wish I had this podcast in my 20s. That's why I
Yeah.
created the podcast. I wrote the book because that's the book I wanted to read and it didn't exist. but so like we do what we wish we had, and that's
Yeah,
where, that's what we're meant to do, and that's like bringing into the world stuff that's needed.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that makes it authentic as well.
Right, right. But also there's some like that just made me think of like as I'm reading parts of your book, it's taking me back to being 13 or whatever and helping
Yeah.
me process what was going on then. It's like time is a flat circle, and like actually we
Yeah.
can tap back into that. So my question is, did you learn anything about yourself as a teenager as you were writing this?
That's a really good question. I think I actually, funnily enough, I think I learned how much internalized biphobia I had as a teenager. Because I was always very, like I said, I knew that I was bisexual when I was very young. And, from the age of like 14, I was going to pride events. I was very open as an ally, which I feel like is a very common kind of way to hide. But I was very loud about my allyship, and my parents knew that I was a queer ally and all of this stuff. I just didn't necessarily feel able to kind of push that just a little bit further and be like, oh, I'm not just an ally, I'm part of the community. But I think I really realized, especially when I was writing the section about the difference between sexual and romantic attraction, about how you can have sexual attraction for certain people and then romantic attraction to other people or to other genders, or they can overlap. And for most of my teen years, I actually regularly said the phrase like, oh, I'm attracted to girls, but I don't think I'd ever marry a girl. I would never get married to a girl. And as I think it was only in my early 20s that I kind of realized that that wasn't true at all, and that I definitely at the time, I didn't have the language of sexual and romantic attraction, but if we're looking at it in hindsight, what I was saying is I'm sexually attracted to girls or to women, but I'm not romantically, and that just wasn't true. I really, really was. But I think I was very, very fearful about what that meant for me if I were to kissing girls on a night out was one thing, but settling down and being in a relationship and having to be really open with friends and family, I was terrified about what that would mean for me and what that would mean for my, the privilege I had and the life that I had. And in hindsight, I realize how that internalized biphobia really was me trying to suppress something, and that was out of fear. And people can be bisexual and not biromantic as well. Of course they can, but for me, it was a case of trying to avoid a potential reality that scared me.
Interesting. I like literally as you're saying that, it's resonating with me. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
kind of I kind of knew that about myself, but like I also thought when I'm first coming out, like I'm sexually attracted to men, but not romantically, and I'm romantically and sexually attracted to women. And that s- quickly started shifting, and I formed emotional and romantic connections with men. But even then I still thought in my head, well, I don't think I would marry a man. And I
Yeah.
think in
Yeah.
hindsight a lot of it was just like my comfort level with
Mm,
the idea of that and putting that out in the world, and like all the things that are more difficult about being
yeah.
married to a same-sex partner, that actually my internal state might have been much more open,
Yeah.
but I was
Absolutely.
somewhere in the back of my mind conscious of the difficulties of being
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
more out as queer.
It's really challenging, and I talk in the book about how I am married. I'm married to a man, and there are challenges that I face with being a bi woman in a relationship with a man. But I got together with my husband quite young, so we were 18 when I was 18 when I met him, and 19, just turned 19 when we got together. And I really think that it wasn't until we'd been together for a few years that I sort of like had the safety and security to go, okay, what does my romantic attraction to women mean? And weirdly, it was being in that relationship with a man that made me realize the internalized biphobia. And by that point, I was in love with my partner, and that was that was a really genuine thing, and we've been together 10 years now, so it's a really genuine relationship. But I think that it just let me, and it also let me come out to my parents as well, because it was like this safety blanket. Even though it was really genuine,
Mm.
it was also something that gave me a bit of security and a bit of privilege in some ways, to kind of say to my parents, I'm queer, I'm bi, and them not have that immediate like, oh, what does this mean right now? Right now, it was fine. I was in a relationship with a man. They didn't have to panic or worry in that sense, as I thought that they potentially might. But yeah, I kind of, being in that relationship allowed me to really explore my identity in more depth. And I think people think of being in a relationship with a partner of a different gender can be quite stifling for bisexuality, or for queerness in general. But
Hmm.
actually, it really gave me the security to kind of go, okay, we're in a place of privilege. We're in a place of um, being this is stable right now. This isn't going to change. So what could that mean? What could my identity mean in a hypothetical world? And
Mm.
just coming more to terms with it. And it was really something that I was able to explore once I had that
Mm.
security.
Oh, that's so interesting because like that's really cool, and I think it's starting to happen more. But like I know a lot of older people who are exploring their identity from within a marriage, and the relationship can actually kind of limit them from exploration because
Yeah, yeah,
they're worried something will change. They're
yeah,
worried that exploring this will lead to,
absolutely,
the
yeah.
marriage changing or
Like
ending,
breaking
and so
down, or
there's
yeah,
actually
yeah,
right. So there's like almost less security sometimes, or if there's not security in the relationship, then it can feel really challenging to explore.
yeah.
So it's cool you had the security.
Every relationship is so different, and I'm not saying that my situation is going to be applicable to everybody. It absolutely isn't. It, like
Yeah.
you said, it could be the exact opposite. For me, I'm really fortunate that I am in a relationship where I was really upfront about my bisexuality. I think it was in the first week of dating my now husband that I sort of said, I'm bisexual. What do you think about that? And he said, it's not really a thing for me to think about. It's, that's you.
Cool.
And I now kind of, yeah, I would never be with somebody who wasn't um, just the biggest queer ally, and my partner is very luckily.
Yeah.
So it's not been a factor for me in terms of exploring my identity. But I also appreciate that for some people that is definitely something that you would need to consider, and it has caused relationships to break down. So I really think that it's just a case of it's individual circumstances. But I guess I don't want people to think that if they are in a different gender relationship, in a straight presenting relationship, I don't want people to think that exploring their bisexuality will inherently mean the breakdown of a relationship, because I think
Yeah.
I can be testament to the fact that that isn't always true. Yeah,
Right. I mean, not only not inherently, but like it in many cases can lead to the strengthening of a relationship
yeah,
and more
absolutely.
authenticity. It's just that what you said is like, I can't be with someone who isn't an ally or a big ally. It's like, yeah, that's so important. And if
Yeah,
you don't realize this about yourself before you get into a relationship, you don't necessarily have that filter, and then it cannot be a safe space to be out. And but
yeah,
so if you have that filter though, then I feel like you have a real opportunity for growth and connection when you're sharing with a partner, as opposed to disconnection and
absolutely.
boundaries.
And again, I talk in the book. This is very early on. I'm not giving any spoilers. I talk in the book about how I was in a relationship in my teen years with a
Yeah.
straight guy who I came
I
out
was
to
going to
him
mention
as
this.
bisexual. Yeah, I came out to him as bisexual, and
Yeah.
he sort of initially seemed okay with it. But then when I started telling other people, he told me to stop telling people. It was embarrassing for him. You know, that people would think that I was going to go and cheat on him with a girl, all of these really negative things. And that relationship generally was not the healthiest in a lot of other ways. But going from that to then being with somebody who just absolutely just didn't respected it and saw it as something that, was a valid part of my identity, but it wasn't a big deal, and would go to
Yeah.
Pride with me and celebrate with me and go to protests and marches, was just such a difference. And I think it really shows that, like, you can find some pretty crappy people, but you can also find some incredible people. And
Yeah.
it's all about being with somebody that makes you feel like your identity is not just okay and not just valid, but celebrated as well.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that can be a process sometimes with people, but like that is so cool that you found that and that you saw the contrast. I want to hit that. Like I love the opening of your book. It's kind of, to paraphrase, it's you kind of go, well, at 13 this happened, at
Yeah.
14 this happened, at 15 this happened. You go through all these
Yeah.
little moments that kind of start to add up. And that's
Yeah.
how I think about my pet. Like I wasn't quite adding it up as I went along, but looking back, it's like, oh yeah, all these little things started to come together and form this narrative.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've heard of some of those bits and pieces already.
I call it my bisexual teenage montage in the book. I think
I love it. I
I
love it. Tell us like sort of the arc of your queer journey, and if you
Yeah.
can bring it up to today. Like where has
Yes.
that led you in
So,
your work?
yeah, in the book, I go from, because the book kind of spans teenage life, so I go from 11 to 20. I'm 29 now, so obviously it goes on a little bit further than that. So, as I said, I kind of always felt that something was a little bit different. I didn't necessarily pin it as crushes on girls. I didn't think of it in that way, but I knew that there were certain girls that I wanted to, just like be really close to and be best friends with. And it was like a bit of a weird obsession. And I just knew that like I would be thinking about how pretty they were the whole time. And I knew that that was something that was, well, it isn't something that's odd, but at the time I felt like that's odd, that's strange, that's not supposed to happen. So I'm a yapper, a true yapper, and I don't keep anything to myself. So I sort of very quickly told my three best friends, like, oh, I think I could be bi. And I don't actually remember where I learned that word. I think maybe school, but I knew that as soon as I did hear the word bisexual, it felt right. And I was like, oh, great. That describes exactly how I feel. Um, Told my three best friends, and then it was another few years before I sort of I think I write in the book that like it started as like a tentative, I think, and then it became like a definite, like I am. So the first time when I was 12, it was definitely I think I might be bisexual. And then when I got to 15, I just realized, no, I am. I was very much told like, oh, you might develop feelings for girls when you're a teenager, but they'll go away. And it'd been about 3 or 4 years and they had not gone away. So I was like, this is happening.
Yeah.
And I told
I
other
think
people.
therefore I am. Isn't
I
that
think therefore
the
I am.
classic
Yeah,
phrase?
exactly. So yeah, I told other people. I told my boyfriend at the time, who, as I said, was not too happy, and I told other friends, and then gradually just kept coming out to new people as I went. And then when I got to sort of like I think it was 19 or 20, it was 20, I think, I came out to my parents, and they were very lovely. um, they didn't necessarily say all the right things, but if there's any parents listening or any parents reading my book, you don't have to say all of the right things for it to still be a positive experience. And I think that there can be that fear of like, oh no, I didn't say something exactly right. I look back on my coming out really positively, even though my parents didn't necessarily say all the right things. So I think that that's kind of important.
Mm,
And they were so
mhm.
fine with it. They were really okay with it. I'd really built it up in my head over the years. And yeah. And then once I was out to my parents, I started being out online and being very loud about my identity and about kind of queer politics, I guess, as well. And then I did a master's degree in gender studies, and I really started to kind of explore systemic oppression and queer theory and all of these other kind of more like more in-depth parts of queerness. And then I sort of moved into the work I'm doing now. So I started working at LGBT charities, and that was amazing because once I started my work at those charities, I met other queer people and I was around other queer people every day, which wasn't necessarily something I'd had before, where queerness was something that we all wanted to talk about. And I started thinking
Yeah.
about gender, and yeah, it kind of evolved to now. And now I'm in a place where I feel like I've possibly accrued enough wisdom to kind of pass that on to younger people and to talk to younger people. So I really love going into schools and delivering talks, and everything that I do is queer inclusive. So the sex education I received at school was very just like, here's the biology, don't get pregnant, don't get an STI, sex is between man and woman.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
I, yeah,
Sounds
and I
familiar.
just really didn't want I don't want the next generation to have that. I want them to know that sex can be expansive and self-defining, and it can be fun and enjoyable, and it doesn't have to be this just scary, very pure thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then kind of through through doing that, I explored the possibility of writing a book, and now I feel like I can not only be open about who I am and open about my queerness, but also open about queerness more broadly and what my feelings are about the way that bisexual people exist and are treated. And yeah, I kind of feel like I've got to, but I still have imposter syndrome. But I've got to a place where I
Of
feel like
course.
I possibly have enough knowledge to maybe be a voice in the community, as well as just benefiting
Yeah.
from the community as I have over the years. The bi community has been, the queer community generally has been a real lifeline for me. So now I'm in a position where I want to give back to that.
Cool. I love it, and your voice comes through in the work, and, like, you at least from what I've read, you have, like, a very clear, like, way of explaining things and an understanding of where things are currently with
Thank
the
you.
bi and queer community. Like, things are evolving, and the what you put in here, I was like, "Yes, yes, yeah." Like, all of
That
it,
means a
I'm
lot
like,
because I think with the reading
"Agree."
I've done, and like I say to my partner sometimes, I'm like, I have a master's degree in gender studies, and I still sometimes read stuff about bisexuality, and it kind of frazzles my brain a little bit. And I have to
Mhm.
read it like 3 or 4 times to take it on board. And that's
Yeah.
fantastic, and it's really important that we have these really deep, nuanced, kind of like think pieces and academic works. That's really important, but it's also important that we have something and a resource that explains things nice and simply, nice and openly, in a way that young people can get their kind of like foot on the ladder and then build up to
Right.
those other kind of books and papers. Yeah,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in particular, like, I always the label wars and everything, like, I go back and forth on how much I like to talk about that, but I just
yeah,
thought you laid out all the different labels under the bi umbrella very clearly without judgment of any of them. Like,
yeah.
sometimes I judge some of them, but, uh, like, I even read it and I was like, "Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't totally realize that's what omnisexual was. Like, maybe
Mm,
that's on more, I
yeah.
should talk about that more, and that's an interesting idea for me." So, it was very
Well,
well laid
that's
out.
the thing is like for some people, all of these terms are going to be very similar, and some people will think, "Oh, well, what's the point in having this term when it basically means the same as this?" And I say in the book, if that's the case for you, great, use bisexual. You don't have to use omnisexual. You don't have to use this. But for somebody else, they might see that sort of distinct difference, and that difference might be important to
Yeah.
them. So it's a case of all of these things are broadly similar, but for certain people, there are distinctions that are important to them and make them choose one term over another. I always say that if I was growing up now, if I was 13 now, I really think I would probably use the word pansexual because that's probably technically more of an accurate descriptor of my sexuality. The only reason I don't is because bi is the word I got to first and I felt at home in that word. And now it just feels like I've used that enough for it to feel like me. So I really think that language is it's what on one hand it's really important, and it's important that we use the language that people want us to use and we mirror the language that people use for themselves. On the other hand, I think a lot of it can also be what term did you find first at what time in your life, what did you gravitate towards, did somebody else that you know who has similar sexuality to you use a certain word, is that why you used it? So it's just a case of just meet people where they're at, but also labels. um, if you want to take your label very seriously, you absolutely can. If you don't want to, you also don't have to.
Yeah, exactly, and all that's in there, which I loved. You even write, like, if you like the colors of a certain flag, that's
Yeah,
a valid reason to choose that.
exactly. Yeah, of
And
course.
yeah, and also, like, maybe you just don't wanna explain what pansexual, omnisexual, or
Yeah,
polysexual mean, so you choose bi because people know what it
because
means.
it's
That's a
easier.
valid
Yeah.
reason too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not about kind of like, I always say queerness is about breaking out of boxes. And I think sometimes within the queer community, we sometimes forget that and we try to put people into the boxes that we have historically broken out of. And we try to be very kind of like nitpicky and assertive and just yeah, try and keep people really tied to certain things. And it's not that's not the case. You can really just be like, this is how I want to describe myself today, or this is how I connect with this, so therefore I'm going to use that term. And it doesn't have to be this really profound thing. It can just be a case of what feels right and what feels kind of comfy.
Yeah. What was it like working with Jessica Kingsley Publishers? What was your experience there? Because they're really diving into this stuff.
Yeah.
It's cool.
So I actually, a few years ago, I was working for an LGBT charity, and Jessica Kingsley do these little book pop ups in like different places in Pride events and sometimes in conferences, like the place that I was at. And they had this pop up table, and I have a queer bookshelf with I think it's like over 100 books about kind of like sex and gender and all of that stuff. Um, on it, and most of the books on that bookshelf, or a lot of the books on the bookshelf, were Jessica Kingsley. So they were at this conference, and I kind of approached. I think I was like, this was not that long ago. This is a few years ago. I approached the person who was working on that table, and I said, "Who do I speak to about writing a book with Jessica Kingsley?" And I don't know where I got the audacity to do that, but I was like, "This is what I want to do. Like, this is a real goal of mine. I would really like to publish a book with you." And they gave me some information, and I went away and I didn't do anything with it for about a year. Like I kind of just got scared. And I
Of
didn't do
course.
anything with it, but I had it in my back pocket. And then, yeah, I kind of pitched the book, and they came back and they said, "This is something we'd be interested in. Can you do?" Because it was just like an email that I initially wrote. So they said, "Can you do a proper pitch?" And I said, "Yes," and I did. And then they said, "We liked it. Can you do a sample chapter?" And I was like, "Yes, I can." So I went away and I wrote. It's actually chapter 3 was my little spoiler. Chapter 3 was my sample chapter, the one with all of the myths and misconceptions.
Myths.
And
Yeah.
I initially wrote that within 3 days. I was just like, go, go, go. And obviously I went back and edited it later for the book. But I wrote that and submitted it. And the whole time I didn't think at all that I was gonna that anything was gonna happen. I mean, I've wanted to write a book since I was very, very young. It's one of the first things I remember about myself when I was a kid is that I was always telling people I wanted to be a writer. So I really didn't think anything was going to come of it. And I was like Googling stuff like they said, oh, it's gone to acquisitions, which is where we kind of like all talk about the book as an organization and we decide if we want to publish it. I was Googling things like what percentage of books that go to acquisitions get picked up and just freaking out. And then, yeah, one day I just got an email saying, yeah, we all like it and we would like to publish it. And I was just about to get on a train to London and I spent the entire train journey sobbing. I have photos of me on that train just like
Wow. Oh,
weeping. And not one person asked if I was okay. Like they didn't know that those were tears of happiness. Not one person came up to me, clearly having a breakdown, and was like, "Are you okay?" Just very British, just very English. Like everyone kind of were just like, "We're not going to go anywhere near that. That's a mess." And
that's
yeah, and
funny.
they've been really good. They've been fantastic, and they've been really I would say like supportive in my vision. I don't feel like they've made too many like changes to what I've wanted. They've been really open with I kind of said like, oh, I really would like the cover to be kind of co-designed by my husband who's a professional designer and also the person who illustrated the inside of the book. I said I'd really like them to work on it together and they said, oh, it's not something we usually do, but we'll give you a shot and they can design something. And they did, and JKP really liked it and we got to use it. And I just think that that kind of creative freedom is just amazing. And yeah, I've really, really been very grateful to the amount of creative freedom that I've been given with the book.
Awesome. I'll have to pitch them my next book
You
if I
definitely
write
should.
another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I did the same thing with my book. I did the first round of interviews for it. I didn't know what it was for, and then I sat on it for a year and did
Yeah.
nothing before I ultimately pitched it as a book.
It's scary
Maybe we
because,
all need to sit
yeah.
there for a year.
as soon as you pitch it, it's real, and as soon as you
Yeah.
actually do something about it, there's the very real notion of rejection, and I think that that's really hard. And I think that I'm a real big dreams, pipe dreams kind of person, and a lot of the time I have these really big ideas and then I don't touch them, and I think subconsciously that's because I'm like, as soon as I actually start to do this, it could fail. So if I don't look at it for a little bit, then maybe I can just keep it as something that could be a success in my mind for a little bit longer. But I think it's okay to do that for a little
Yeah.
while. But I do think eventually you kind of need to just jump, and then
Yeah.
you'll just see what happens.
Yep. You're never fully ready. You figure it out as
You're
you go.
never fully
That's the
ready. Oh my
journey of
god.
life.
Yeah,
If you
absolutely
wait
not.
till you're
I
fully ready to step in the arena, you might never step in there.
Yeah, oh, I wasn't ready to write this book in so many ways. I was like sitting in a cafe and like calling my partner and being like, I can't do this. Like, why did I think I could write this book? I've sat here for 2 hours and I've written like 5 words. What am I doing? And you just do it. Like yeah, there's it's a really, really cheesy quote, and I kind of hate myself for quoting it, but I love it. Like I authentically love this quote, which is like, "Do it scared." If you think, "Oh, I can't do it, I'm scared," it's like you can do it scared, and it's so cheesy, but that really genuinely helped. I think in that, like you are allowed to. You don't have to be in a perfect position before you do something, before you take on a big project, before whatever. You don't have to be this flawless version who's going to get something right. You can do it absolutely petrified. You'll still get it done.
Yeah.
You will get it done. And then you'll be even prouder of yourself because you were breaking it all the way through, but you managed it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Beautiful. Why'd you call it step by step, aside from the obvious bi pun?
Yeah. So this was actually, I am embarrassed about how long it took me to get to this title. So I pitched, I think it was like 6 or 7 titles before I got to step by step. It was like a long process. I'd fully finished writing the book. It hadn't done edits yet, but I'd basically finished writing the book before I came up with the title. And
Huh.
I'd been pitching all of these titles to JKP, and they were like, "We don't think this is right. Like, we don't think this one's going to work." And at the time, I was like, "Oh God, like just pick up one of my titles." Like, I was sort of like a bit annoyed, thinking like, "Oh, one of these must work. I've pitched so many," and then I just had this like epiphany of the title. It came to me so quickly, and it came to me as if so easily that I didn't know how I hadn't thought of it sooner. And it was just
Mhm.
perfect because you've got the bi pun in there, which is a bit of fun. But also, like, I realized that I think for anybody at any time in their life, in their sexuality journey, but I think particularly for young people, you are just taking things one step at a time. You're taking it step by step. My book breaks down different topics step by step. It's about kind of like not rushing into something, just taking it as it comes, working with what you've kind of got, and then yeah, not trying to rush through or come to some perfect conclusion. So as soon as I had that title, I was like, that's the book. Like, and I felt that more than I did with any of the previous titles. I was like, that's the title. And I pitched it and they said, yeah, that works. And then I was so glad, even though I was kind of annoyed before, I was so glad that they said no to all of the other titles because yeah, this is
Yeah.
definitely the right one. And yeah, just taking it one step at a time, particularly when you're young, you don't
Cool.
have to rush. Things evolve so much between the ages of 13 and 18. Things change like crazy. So you don't have to like rush. It's not a race to adulthood and to figuring everything out. Just take it one step at a time.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that resonates so much for me, not even just about queerness, but just like in general in life. Like
Everything.
sometimes
Yeah.
we can't and like in terms of the title coming to you, it's like sometimes we really want to accomplish something or do something and
Yeah.
we try to force it out and sometimes you just got to
Yeah.
like wait
That's what
and
I was
get
doing.
quiet and let it come. And when you
Yeah.
really get quiet and in touch with yourself, like the things you need will come to you
Yeah.
and they will often come very suddenly and clearly and you will wonder why you didn't think of it before and sometimes it's cuz like you can't try so hard. You just got to
Yeah. No,
let the
100%.
universe show you. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
yeah, ironically, I'm saying, like, take it step by step and don't rush. I was rushing. I was trying to find this perfect title and forcing it, and it wasn't working. And in a way, I think finishing the book and looking at the book as a whole, allowed me to really realize what the core theme was, which was just this, like, yeah, just take it one step at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I want to ask about like the parent child relationship of it
Yes,
all with
yeah.
this book. Like, hopefully some teenagers, kids at this age will see this book and buy it themselves, and that's great. How do you, but also like some kids may not even know to look for a book like this.
Mm,
How do you see the relationship between parents and children coming into play with this book, both in terms of getting in front of them and also talking about it? Like, and just broadly, how can parents help
mm.
support their queer children's exploration and identity journey?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my kind of dream for this book, like you said, I'm sure there's lots of young people who will buy it themselves, but my real dream is like a parent. There's certain parents, and I absolutely love them when I encounter them, which are like their child's biggest ally. And my dad does it now. If my dad sees anything pride related, he like texts me a picture, and he's like, "Look, pride," and to the point where it's like it's cheesy, but it's really funny, and it comes from a place of support. And my absolute dream is for parents to buy this for their bi and pan children, and to be like, I saw this and I thought of you, and maybe read it themselves first and kind of know what they're giving to their child so they can have these conversations. But I really love that idea, and that really warms my heart, the idea of this kind of being like a gift from parent to child. And I think for that reason, it's really important that I'm talking to parents when I'm marketing the book and when I'm having these conversations, because you're allowed to kind of yeah, you're allowed to talk to your child about these things, and obviously in a way that they're comfortable with. But I think a lot of children want to be open, and they want to know that they have their parents' support. So yeah, I think it's a case of being the parent of a queer child. I think I said this earlier, but being the parent of a queer child, especially if you're not queer yourself, I think it can be scary. It can be really scary
Hmm.
because you are not necessarily you've not had to handle this yourself. Their teen years might look very very different to your teen years, and you kind
Yeah.
of don't really have a rule book on how things are gonna go, and that's not true for certain minorities and marginalized groups as well. So, like for example, mums are able to talk to their daughters about what misogyny looks like and share their own experiences, and they can relate. Parents of color can sort of talk to their children, and there's that kind of like shared identity there. But for queerness, that's not necessarily the case. You can have straight parents and queer children. Um, so I think it's scary. I think if you're a parent and your child comes out to you as queer, especially if you've not really encountered queerness before, or you have only heard the fear mongering in the news, that can be a really, really scary thing to kind of go, right, what is my step in this and what is my role in this? Um, and in the book, there's a chapter about kind of this idea about bisexuality being a phase. And I explore both sides of it. I explore the fact that it isn't a phase for a lot of people, but then I also explore the fact that sexuality is fluid and open and it can change, and that that's also okay. That doesn't invalidate it. And in that chapter, there's a moment where I address parents sort of directly. And I say, if your child comes out to you, um, you don't necessarily have to say the perfect thing, but you do have to try and meet them where they're at and not doubt their identity. Because if their identity does change over the years, so
Mm.
if your child comes out to you as bi and you say, oh, you're too young to know, two things will happen. They will either still be bi when they're older and they won't feel that their identity is something that they can be authentic about with you, or they might realize that it was a phase and change their minds. But either way, they might be worried about, okay, if they go, oh, actually, I'm not bi, I'm straight, they might worry about that I told you so, and therefore not feel really
Yeah.
comfortable to talk to you about that change. Or if they realize that they are gay or lesbian and they're not bisexual, they might worry about, okay, well, I came out with a queer identity before and it didn't go very well. So am I actually going to come out again? How is this queer identity going to be any different? So
Yeah.
it's just kind of about just meeting somebody where they're at and being like, okay, thank you for telling me. what can I do what do you need from me? And not assuming and just leaving the door open, because things might change, but things also might not change. And the thing that will stick in your child's mind is how you responded, and if you were there for them and if you were supportive, even if you didn't necessarily say all of the perfect things.
Right, right. That's such an important message, and the way you just phrase that is perfect. And like, it makes parents. Sometimes you do know stuff as a parent. Like parents know something,
Mm.
or they have an intuition about their child
Yeah,
because they know their child well, and
absolutely.
they
Yeah.
may be correct, and it isn't beneficial to the child to
Yeah.
tell them that correct thing at that moment. That
Yeah.
what they may need in that moment is just your presence and your acknowledgement and validation of what they're exploring, and then let them continue to explore it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
don't like you yeah that the relationship is complicated, and you don't want to
Yeah.
like guide them too much because then they may resist something that they might explore
Yeah.
naturally. Yeah,
And kind of I wouldn't say a pet peeve is a bit strong, but I would say that something I see happening a lot is when parents kind of suspect that their child is queer, and then the child comes out and the parent says, "Oh, I've always known that." And it's like, that might I understand how you might, as a parent, think that that is supportive, because you're saying, "Oh, I've always known, and it's not been an issue, and it's not a big deal to me." But even if you have
yeah,
always known, that is their moment of, coming out, and it's a huge moment. And even if you did already know, they didn't necessarily know that you knew. So it's not about, kind of being like, "Oh, I knew that before you did." It's being like, "Thank you for telling me. I'm really proud of you. That's a big moment. Thank you for trusting me with this information." If you had a child who was, super academically gifted and then they got all A stars, you wouldn't go, "Oh, well, I knew you were going to do that." You'd be like, "Oh,
yeah,
that's amazing. That's incredible. Even though I suspected, I knew you probably
yeah,
were going to get all A
right,
stars. I still want to celebrate you in that moment." So I think that I
right,
understand the intention with the like, "Oh, I've always known." Um, but try not to be too dismissive, and try to still be sort of like to hold the moment and hold space for the moment of just kind of like, this was a big thing for them to tell me. And you
right.
can say, "Oh, I've had a sneaky suspicion, but I really appreciate you telling me right now, and let me know if there's anything that you need."
Yeah, yeah, lovely. There's kind of a magic phrase that I use so often in my coaching practice, which is like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, it's not like, if somebody's coming out, it's not like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
genuine, like, "Yeah, okay, that makes sense." Like,
That makes sense. Yeah.
whether I knew it or not, or had the suspicion, like, what you are telling me now makes sense, that and thank you for sharing it. And, like,
Yeah, absolutely.
that sometimes that's all you really need to do is just, like,
Yeah.
validate and acknowledge that. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Let's just briefly go through a few chapters, and everyone should read the book and buy it for your children. And there's a lot more in here, but just to go like some of the big key points, we went through a few of the beginning ones about the identities and myths and misconceptions I've talked about on this podcast forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have a great chapter about it, but everyone can read that in the book. Okay, chapter 4 is called "Just a Phase?" question mark.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is a perennial topic. And so my question is like, you wrote about it beautifully. How do you balance the idea that like bisexuality isn't a phase, it's a
Mm.
fixed identity. I'm still bisexual. Every time
Yeah.
my doctor asks me, I'm still bisexual. And yet the idea of fluidity uh, incorporates that there can be different phases in your identity over time.
Yeah.
So how do you like balance those two ideas?
I think, again, it kind of comes back to recognizing that it's on an individual basis for each person. So for some people, their bisexuality will be a constant throughout their lives. And I say I'm bisexual right now. I think I will be bisexual forever. I've been bisexual from when I was younger to now in my late 20s. I think that will continue for the rest of my life. That's my guess, but I'm never going to say for sure, because I don't 100% know. I haven't lived my whole life yet. For some people, that will be something that is very constant. And for other people, their identity is going to shift and change and move. And those two things can exist at the same time without pushing one onto the other, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think I say in the book about like if you played guitar for like 10 years and then you stopped playing guitar and you realized I just don't really have an interest in playing guitar anymore, people wouldn't say, oh, well, you weren't a guitar player. You were a guitar player. You were just a guitar player for 10 years. Um, that it doesn't mean that you weren't that thing. It just means that that was a period in your life and it's now come to an end, but it doesn't take away from the experience that you had during it. So if somebody is bisexual for 10 years and then they go, actually, maybe now I've reached a point where gay describes me better or straight describes me better, that doesn't necessarily take away from what you felt during those years. And I think it's about not forcing it onto somebody. So we can recognize that sexuality can be fluid, gender can be fluid, but that doesn't mean we can force fluidity onto somebody in the same way that um, for many of us, we will go through our lives being attracted to different people and we'll fall in love different times and we'll have different partners. But if you were with your current partner and somebody said, right, we understand that people can be fluid and they can change who they love over the course of their life. So right now we want you to stop loving this person and love this person. That wouldn't be possible. So we can understand it as a concept more broadly, but when it comes down to the individual and trying to force something on the individual, it's never going to work unless it happens kind of naturally. And for some people it will, and for some people it won't.
Yeah, exactly. Love it. Good answer. Okay, you have another chapter on representation. Very
Yes.
important. What do you want young people to know, or why is representation important, particularly for this age group?
So looking back to again my teen years, I really didn't see any bisexual representation on TV or in books. I occasionally saw some kind of gay and lesbian representation, but even then, it wasn't that prominent, and it also probably realistically wasn't written in the best way. And I think it's really important. There's that phrase of, and it's in the book. It's like you can't be what you can't see. And it's not to say you can't be bisexual if you don't see bisexual people on TV, but I think that you struggle to be proud of your identity and to feel no shame in your identity if it seems like everywhere else that you look, television, books, films, is sort of not platforming people like you. That can be really challenging. So I mean, honestly, in terms of representation, if young people could take anything from the representation chapter, and what my dream would be for young people to go and for young black people to go and write their own stories. And if you want to be a writer when you grow up, if you want to be a filmmaker, if you want to be a musician, anything that you want to be, go and put by characters and by experiences into those stories, and make sure that you're kind of sharing your authentic experiences. Because again, when we do have bisexual characters and queer characters, a lot of the time they're written not by bisexual and queer people, and then we lose that authenticity and we maybe get into kind of like stereotypes, and not so accurate or positive representations. So yeah, I think seek out media that makes you feel good and that you see yourself in and that helps with your own self-discovery. Don't spend your time on things that make you feel bad about yourself or make you feel that you have to hide yourself. And if you are a creative, go and create by stuff and put it out into the world because we need more of it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to do that. And I'm also seeing now, especially with like a lot of AI tools, how more and
Mm,
more people are going to be creating stuff, whatever
yeah,
form it is. And I'm very curious to see as that barrier to creation lowers, like
yeah,
what do young people create around this
yeah.
topic? Could be
Absolutely. And
interesting.
queer people are so creative. Like queer people they're just great. Like I don't want to say that queer people are more creative than straight people. I don't want to say that, but
Yeah, no, we would never say that.
we
That's
would never say that. That would be really stereotypical. But no,
yeah,
I
it's
just
true.
see
It's very true. I
yeah,
just wouldn't say it out loud.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I see the creativity within the queer community, and I'm astounded every single day by the things that people create. And yeah, I want young queer people to know that they can make their own stuff and they can tell their own stories.
Thanks for listening to this episode with Laura Clarke. There's a little bit more with Laura coming up. I asked her about her chapter on sex. That answer is really interesting. There's also a little bit of bonus material with Laura on Patreon. I asked her about her chapter on dating and also her chapter on coming out and what young people in particular should know about coming out. So check that out at patreon.com/RobertBrooksCohen. Also, happy September. It's Bi Visibility Month. Stay tuned to my newsletter for some upcoming events this fall. You can subscribe to my newsletter in the show notes or on my website, robertbrookscohen.com. And I'm open for individual coaching. I have a few new spots open in the fall. I always have 2 scholarship spots available, which is reduced price coaching, half price of my normal price. I have one of those spots available, and the other spot should be coming available in October or November. So if you've been interested in individual coaching, now is the time to schedule an intro call with me. Mention the scholarship spot, and if it's still available, we can talk about that. And now enjoy the rest of this episode with Laura Clarke. Okay, the last chapter in your book is called Sex.
Yes.
I didn't get there. So what's give us a little preview? Like you're writing to young people about sex. What's in there? What's your message?
So in the sex chapter, I kind of break it down into 3 key parts. One being, I guess, physical safety and how do you protect yourself if you're having sex with people who, have lots of different bodies, and what does that look like? That's kind of physical safety. Then I go on to consent, which is more about kind of like mental safety and how do you protect yourself and how do you protect your partners and make sure that everybody is comfortable. And then finally, I move on to pleasure, which is we've got kind of like physical safety, emotional safety, and then just like fun, fun and pleasure, because that's kind of what is missing. So yeah, I mean, I talk about how to have physically safe sex and to protect yourself from STIs, and then it's more into like how can you create a sexual experience, and like I said, it might not be when they're reading the book, it might be a few years into the future, but how can you start to create sexual experiences that feel not just safe for everybody involved, safe is important, but also feel just like comfortable and fun and enjoyable, and also that you don't take too seriously. I know that when I was growing up,
Yeah.
I saw sex scenes on TV and it all seemed so glamorous and so polished. And I was like, I would spend hours thinking about like, oh, when I get to that point and when I'm having sex, how do I appear as sexy as they are? And how do I seem like I know what I'm doing? And I really think that the best sex you can have is one where you can laugh at yourself and you and your partner can laugh together, because things happen in sex that you don't see in TV and movies and porn. And things can be awkward and kind of things can be awkward and silly and funny. So how do
Yeah.
you have a really healthy attitude to that when you are younger, and how do you go in going, right, it's not about looking like a porn star, it's about making sure that you have an authentic connection with somebody, that you feel comfortable, and that you're doing things that feel good for you and your partner. And also about kind of like figuring out what sex looks like for you, because I'm a really big advocate for like sex is what you decide it is. You get to define what sex means for you. And I think especially for queer people, and I think actually particularly, I'd say for queer people generally, but I also think particularly for people who have vulvas who are having sex with other people with vulvas, because we're such a penetration kind of obsessed society, a lot of queer people are like, well, if there's not penetration involved, then what does sex mean, and what is sex for me? Have I had sex if I've never, involved penetration in my sex? But you actually get to really kind of decide what sex looks like for you, and if what one person would consider foreplay for you is actually your version of sex, that's fantastic. Then that's sex for you. We can all define it differently. And I just really want young people to know that, again, there's no rule book to follow. You don't have to do what everybody else is doing. You don't have to feel, we talk about peer pressure all the time, but you don't have to feel pressured. And you really get to kind of forge your own sexual path and sexual journey, as long as you're keeping safe and you're being respectful of the people involved and it's consensual. You really get to figure out what does your version of sex look like and what feels good for you.
Yeah. Cool. I love all that. When I was younger, felt like sex was this thing you had to perform and
Yeah,
check off a list for me, and
yeah,
like I wanted to have done it, but I guess there was enjoyment in it, but I wasn't really focused on the playfulness and the sensation and the enjoyment
Yeah,
of it.
yeah.
It was more of I felt a lot of pressure to be doing it.
This is a this is an incredibly British story, but, you said about having a list. There's a book that we have, here published by a British author called Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging, and within so snogging is like making out, and, in the book, there was something called a snogging scale, and it was actually a list that was printed in the book, and it went from, like, flirting to holding hands to kissing with tongue, all the way to sex, and this was printed in the book. And as a teenager, I ripped that out of the book, and I like genuinely thought that as I went through my teenage years, I had to tick these off in order. um,
Uh-huh.
and I think a lot of people, it's not as literal as that, but I do think we all have this mental list, particularly when we're younger, of like, oh, first I do this, and then in a few years' time I do this, and then I eventually
Yeah.
graduate, in quotes, graduate to again in quotes, full sex. And
Yeah.
that isn't the case. You get to switch things up. It's very pick and mix with sex. You get to decide what you take and you get to decide what you leave. And there's not a correct order as long as it's the order that you feel comfortable in.
Right, right. There's not like certain sex acts are not better than others or
No.
like higher level or you haven't achieved. It's like, yeah, no, just do what you and your partner want and think is fun and playful. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Lovely.
Amazing.
Well, thank you for being here today, Laura. I'm so excited for this book to come out on September 18th. Tell people how they can find the book and more about your work
Yes.
if they're interested.
So if you go online and look up, I'll hold it up again, step by step, the ultimate guide for bisexual, pansexual, and queer young people. So you can look that up. Ideally, buy from your local queer bookstore, is what I always say, but I do understand that sometimes that isn't a possibility. So it is available other places online. And you can order it kind of online. But yeah, you can find me at my body and yours on Instagram and also TikTok are my two like primary kind of social media platforms. And my website is www.mybodyandyours.com, and you'll see all of the work that I do around kind of like training and sex education and also writing. And I'm posting a lot about the book at the moment, so you'll probably see a lot about the book.
Cool, amazing. All of those links will be in the show notes. You can check that out. And yeah, check out the book, read it. Thank you so
Thank
much again for
you.
being here. This was lovely and it's going to help so many young people. The book we wish we had.
Thank you so much for having me.
Two Bi Guys by One Bi Guy is produced and edited by me, Robert Brooks Cohen, and it was created by me and Alex Boyd. Our new logo art is by Caitlin Weinman. Our music is by Ross Mincer. To help support this podcast, visit patreon.com/Robert Brooks Cohen. You'll get full video episodes, early access, and bonus content. Visit robertbrookscohen.com to learn more about my coaching, my book, and my stand-up comedy. And thanks for listening to Two Bi Guys by One Bi Guy.